Some feminists have found psychoanalysis useful in studying literature, adapting its ideas to fit their own perspectives. Sandra Gilbert and Susan Guber examined the works of women writers such as Jane Austen, Mary Shelley, and Bronte's sisters. They explored themes like motherhood, confinement, female identity, and illness. They argued that female authors often identified with both the villainous and the heroic characters in their works. For example, they noted the image of the mad woman or the monster was often set against the angelic or heroic female figure, showing the struggle of women to find their place in society. Despite the struggles these writers depicted, they also imagined a world where women could exist as whole individuals rather than being seen as other. In the 1980s, French feminism introduced new ways of using psychoanalysis to understand female identity and literature. Thinkers like Zixu and Luz Irigaray expanded on the ideas of Freud, Jung, and Lacan to explore femininity in new ways. Some feminists found Freud's work problematic because they believed he misunderstood women, focusing only on their roles in male psychology. However, others acknowledged that Freud provided women with a way to express their emotions and struggles in a world where their psychological conditions were often dismissed. In Freud's time, many women suffering from conditions such as depression or chronic fatigue were labeled as hysterical, and their problems were not taken seriously. Some were even subjected to extreme medical treatments such as isolation or surgery based on the belief that their suffering came from their biological nature. Freud believed that literature, like dreams, revealed unconscious desires and conflicts. He argued that artistic expression often had a psychological origin, and literary critics have since used his ideas to uncover hidden meanings in texts. By analyzing the deeper unconscious layers of literature, critics can find new ways to understand how writers, especially women, express their struggles with identity, power, and repression. Freud also suggested that many of our fears and desires are shaped by childhood experiences, which is why psychoanalytic critics often examine how literature reflects early psychological development. Lacan expanded on Freud's theories by describing how identity is formed through language. He argued that before a child learns language, they exist in a world without clear distinctions between self and others. This early stage, called the imaginary, is later replaced by the symbolic order, where language creates categories such as male and female, self and other. According to Lacan, this system, controlled by patriarchal authority, shapes how we think and speak. The process of learning language and entering society means accepting the rules and structures set by those in power, which often reinforces male dominance. Many feminist critics have used Lacan's ideas to show how traditional literature and language force women into specific roles and prevent them from expressing their full identities. French feminists challenged this structure by developing new forms of writing, which they call écriture féminine or feminine writing. They argue that traditional language is male dominated and does not fully capture female experience. Instead, they seek to create a more fluid, free way of writing that breaks away from strict rules. Zixu imagines a utopian space where women can communicate beyond the limits of patriarchal language. She believes that women need to find their own voices in writing and reject the structures that force them into predefined roles. By using experimental writing styles, female writers can break away from traditional storytelling methods and explore new ways of expressing their emotions and identities. Irigaray focuses on the connection between women's physical experiences and their way of thinking. She argues that male philosophy often ignores the body and that female identity cannot be fully understood through male dominated concepts. Traditional ways of thinking separate the mind and body, valuing logic and reason over emotion and physical experience. She believes that this separation reflects a male centered worldview that dismisses the importance of female perspectives. Embracing the connection between the body and thought is essential for creating a more complete understanding of female identity. Julia Kristeva also builds on Lacan's ideas, but she emphasizes the importance of motherhood. She introduces a concept of the semiotic, a form of communication that exists before structured language. She suggests that the mother child bond plays a key role in shaping identity, even before the child enters the symbolic order. In her later work, Kristeva embraces motherhood as a model for psychological well being. She argues that the relationship between mother and child contains deep emotional and symbolic meanings that influence a person's development. Many feminists follow Kristeva's idea that motherhood is central to female identity, seeing it as a source of strength rather than just a biological role. Another approach within feminist psychoanalysis is myth criticism. Some feminists study ancient myths to explore how female figures were represented in different cultures. They argue that as patriarchal societies took over, powerful goddesses were transformed into negative figures like witches and seductresses. For example, figures like Medusa, who were once seen as powerful protectors, were later depicted as dangerous monsters. By studying these myths, feminists highlight how ideas about gender are constantly changing and challenge rigid definitions of femininity. They argue that mythology reflects society's attitudes toward women, showing how female power has been reshaped and controlled over time. Adrienne Rich and other feminist critics argue that myths can be a powerful tool for understanding women's history and identity. They criticize thinkers like Carl Jung and Northrop Frye for focusing too much on male centered myths and ignoring female perspectives. Rich believes that revisiting ancient myths allows women to reclaim lost histories and understand how gender roles have been shaped by cultural narratives. By analyzing these myths, feminists can see how different societies have defined and redefined femininity, showing that gender roles are not fixed but constantly evolving. One of the key ideas in feminist psychoanalysis is the connection between personal experiences and broader social structures. Many feminist thinkers argue that women's psychological struggles are not just individual problems but are linked to larger systems of power. For example, women who feel anxiety or self doubt may actually be responding to the limitations placed on them by society. By understanding these connections, feminists hope to challenge and change the structures that keep women in subordinate positions. Feminist psychoanalysis also explores how literature reflects and reinforces these social structures. Many female writers use literature to question traditional ideas about gender and identity. They create characters who struggle against the roles imposed on them, revealing the pressures women face in society. By studying these works, feminist critics can uncover hidden messages about power, repression, and resistance. They argue that literature is not just a reflection of reality, but also a way of shaping it. By changing the way women are represented in literature, feminists hope to create new possibilities for how women see themselves and their place in the world.